Sister! The distant call for aid rose above the groaning din in the makeshift pest house. Guzma ignored it. She tied off the stitches she was working on and quickly assessed her current patient. The infection had spread to his organs. He probably wouldn't last the night. Sister! Cried the voice again, louder and more empathetic. Guzma picked up her few remaining ministration supplies and pushed her way towards the voice, past the pallets, cots, and rows of incense braziers. The waft of rot and burning spice filled her nostrils. In all her season she had never seen the plague like this before. Like everyone else in Grovenheim, Guzma thought the festering demons had been driven back from the valley, off to ravage some other poor town in the heaving peaks. The townsfolk had celebrated and given praise to Sigmar. A banquet had been held in this very hall, and Guzma drank orchard bud wine alongside the Free Guild guardsmen who had fought so long and so bravely. She woke up to screaming the next morning as the plague took hold of its first victims, and she had barely slept or eaten since. Truth be told, she could no longer remember how long it had been. Days and nights blended together into a single nightmare, from which she would give anything to be awoken. Sister! Guzma pushed through the throng of people and saw who was calling out to her. It was a soldier lying on a cot, his left leg missing from the knee, and his right shoulder crisscrossed with stitches. She recognized him. She had worked on him several days ago. She remembered sewing his leg and gouging the rot from his shoulder, but she hadn't held much hope that he would survive. Yet here he was, wan and thin, but without the clammy complexion of the morbidly infected. It took Guzma a moment to notice that he was clutching the rim of a barrow, inside which lay another man, racked with pain and fever. A woman dressed in black and purple robes was trying to pull the handcart from the soldier's grasp. Though her skin was corpse pale, she was clearly strong and showed no sign of illness. "Help!" said the soldier, through gritted teeth. "Don't let her take him away." "Sister," said the pale woman, her voice calm and cold as a glacial lake, "this man is beyond your help. I will take him from your hands before his illness births more disease." "Don't let her do it!" cried the soldier. "She kills the ones she takes. I can hear them scream as she wheels them away, and then they fall silent in an instant." "I am ending their suffering," said the pale woman. "It's a kindness for those beyond salvation." Guzma didn't know what to make of the scene unfolding before her. She was exhausted, her mind was clouded by endless, gruesome work she had been performing. Perhaps it was better if this patient was taken away. From the looks of him, he didn't have much longer to live anyway. Just then the man in the barrow let out a gurgling moan. Guzma looked down and saw a fist-sized cyst protruding from his thigh. The skin on the cyst was undulating, and the pressure was causing it to bulge outwards. Guzma had seen this before. It was ready to burst, and she had only moments left to act. Guzma lunged over to the nearest brazier and pulled out the poker from the embers. She spun back to the man in the barrow and plunged the red-hot metal into the heart of the cyst. The reek of burning flesh and evaporated pus hit Guzma like a battering ram, taking the air out of her lungs in an instant. The man screamed in anguish as the poker seared into his leg as he arched his back in pain. His muck-encrusted jerkin split down the middle. Guzma's heart sank as she saw his exposed abdomen, swollen to hemispherical proportions by another far larger cyst. The man's belly burst open with a wet pop, sending a shower of maggot-filled pus flying outwards. Putrid eruption blasted Guzma to the floor. As she hit the ground, she saw the soldier she had saved. He had been covered with plump maggots, each the size of a swollen finger, and they were burrowing through the stitching on his shoulder and into the saw wound at the end of his leg. He was screaming. Guzma saw the pale woman move towards the soldier, her black and purple robes untouched by the contents of the cyst, her fingers glowing with amethyst light. Jagged teeth sunk into Guzma's skin as she cried out in pain. Her heart raced as she realized she too was covered in slime-coated maggots, and they were tearing her by the score with their rows of razor fangs. She grabbed at the maggots and tried to pull them from her body, but they were already far too embedded into her flesh. Her hands burned when she touched the grotesque palpi. She could feel the infection carried by them spreading through her palms and fingers. A purple light was washed over Gozma. The maggots recoiled and began to shrivel, each letting out a screeching wail. The cystic filth that covered Gozma started to evaporate, and her racing heart slowed to a crawl before a brief moment stopping completely. The pale woman was looming over Guzma, her fingers splayed and her eyes glassed over. Guzma sat up, and the desiccated husks of the maggots fell harmlessly to the floor. She looked over at the soldier. He too had been saved from the carnivorous worms. He lay dead on his cot, still and peaceful, the grimace of pain gone from his face. "By Sigmar," said Guzma under her breath. "No," the pale woman said, "not by Sigmar." Guzma looked up at her savior. There was an endless well of strength in the woman's cold and piercing stare. "Sigmar has forsaken this place," the woman continued, "but Nagash sees your struggle." Nagash! Guzma has heard that name as a child in bedtime stories that had been told to frighten her. "Nagash can end the torments of these people," said the pale woman. "Nagash can end your own nightmares. He offers his help to you freely." The woman extended her hand down to Guzma. Guzma took a deep breath and looked around her. No one in the packed hall had noticed her ordeal. They were all too busy enduring their own woes and maladies. "Will you accept Nagash's help?" asked the pale woman, her hand still outstretched. Guzma took hold of the woman's hand and allowed herself to be pulled up from the ground. "Yes," she said, "just tell me what I need to do." Guzma felt a grave chill spreading throughout her body. "There is nothing you need to do," said the pale woman, her lips curved into a thin smile. "Be still, sister, and your end will come." This was Grim Deliverance, a Malign Portents short story. Thank you for listening.